Alright, today we're looking at Diamond DPS. And first time I did this, the recording actually got corrupted. So I'm redoing it. Yay! Goodness. So if it seems like I already know what's going to happen, it's because I do already know what's going to happen because I just looked at this for an hour. Alright. So your hog gets pulled off. You lost your Sombra. The chances of you winning this fight are already very low. So instead of pushing up here, I guess you should start backing out. I mean, you get a really nice dynamite, which gives you a lot of ult charge, so that's good. But instead of, yeah, and you do back out and get another nice dynamite. So that's good. Now here, instead of staying, you end up getting domed, which is unfortunate. It happens. You shouldn't be too upset, but maybe if you had backed up a little bit more, because you're playing Ashe. She's excels best at medium to long ranges, right? Medium range is her sweet spot, and you staying right next to the choke means that you're playing at basically close range. You don't really want to do that. Another thing, so you're focusing on the shield, which normally is good. You want to be breaking down the Orisa shield as fast as you can, because that's how you win Orisa v Hog. Against Orisa v Hog, you break the shield. Well, that's the most common way of how you would win. But just looking at the team comps here, they have Ursa Hog, you have Ursa Hog. They have Hanzo McCree. You have Ashe Diva. So, or Diva? Genji, sorry. You have Ashe Genji. So McCree, especially after the new buff, has insane shield break. So does Hanzo with the storm arrows. Versus Genji, who really doesn't have that much damage from his left or right clicks. And you, who, yes, your shots do a lot of damage, but you have to reload after 12, and it takes a long time to reload those 12 shots. So you're not going to be winning the shield battle. So as soon as you see the two team comps, you should recognize that you're not going to win the shield battle. And then what are your options? You can either switch comps, or switching comps doesn't really happen that much, especially in solo queue ladder. It doesn't happen that much, and that's fine. So then your other option is to play around the Orisa shield instead of going straight at it head on. Maybe flank around to the right, so then you can get a dynamite off and maybe get a pick, or flank around to the left. And then, because when you do that, then the Orisa has three options. One of them is stay here at the choke and keep fighting your team, in which case you get free reign. You can kill whoever you want and without any pressure, basically. Or the Orisa can place a shield to block you and keep fighting but then your team can then kill the Orisa pretty easily. Or the Orisa can back out, which is what's usually going to happen. Usually what happens when you go with flanks is either they just start backing out, especially when you land a big dynamite. They start backing out, or some attention is split on to you and some remains on your team, in which case that's good, because then you can regroup with your team and focus down, or go on a different flank route, get a different angle of, get a different sideline. So you don't always have to be playing into the shield like you are now, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Now that doesn't mean you should always be flanking, but flanking is definitely a option. That hook there is max range hook. There's nothing you could have done about that. Now your Bob usage here, it doesn't really get that much value. It does end up killing the McCree, but that's only because your Orisa pulled the McCree into your Bob, which she might not have meant to do that on purpose, but it happened, and that was good. So generally when you're using Bob, you want to either be setting up to contest point, use it to zone people out of an area, or use it to, I guess, deal damage. Like, use it as a big fat torb turret, right? And ideally, the best usage of Bob is all three of those. You contest point, capture point, use it as a turret and get kills, and you zone them off from point at the same time. Now, even just doing two of those things is a good enough Bob, so you don't always have to be like concerned with like getting all three of those. So examples of each of those would be, I guess, throwing Bob on point would contest point, and it would zone them off from point. So throwing Bob out here, for example, would zone them away from your spawn, but it doesn't really do much else. Setting Bob on like a high ground where it can still see down on the enemy team, but the enemy team is going to have a hard time shooting back up onto it, would be an example of using it as like a big fat torp turret where it can just get free reign and get a lot of kills. Now, your Bob here does do one of those, so it's not a completely, it's not a terrible Bob, but it's definitely not a good Bob. It's not like a great Bob, I guess, would be a better way of saying it, because you're zoning them away from your spawn, but you don't really need an ult to do that. Like, especially since you're still in your spawn, they can't deal any damage to you, but you can deal a lot of damage to them, because you're at, you know, the main range where Ashe excels best at, and if they want to keep fighting in your spawn, not only do you have the respawn advantage, but you can just keep pumping out damage into them without any damage being applied onto you. So eventually they're going to have to back up, regardless of whether you use a Bob or not. So it'd be much better to save your Bob to throw onto point this next fight, or, you know, use it to zone them away from point instead of zoning them away from your spawn, which you would end up doing anyways. That was a good dynamite, good kill on the Hanzo. So now there's a Lucio on you. I don't know if you don't see him or if you just forget about him. Like, you see him now, and then you shoot at him a couple times, and you're like, oh, he's going away. And then you kind of forget about him. He's still behind you now, came back behind, and you get boop and you die. So you want to be more cognizant of your surroundings, like be more aware of where the enemies are and how they can hurt you. So if this was like a normal map where there wasn't a giant hole in the middle, maybe you could have ignored the Lucio and gotten some kills on the enemy team before, you know, looking back at the Lucio. But even then, a Lucio can deal a lot of damage. So, especially on a more or less stationary Ashe, if he gets, you know, 3 or 4 dinks and then boop melees you, probably dead. So you don't want to ignore the Lucio, but obviously you're looking at the high nooning McCree, right? You got distracted by the Lucio's there, you shoot at him, he goes away, or so you think, he comes back. But then McCree immediately high noons, so you're like, oh, I should kill McCree. And then he gets booped away by Whole Hog, so you're like, okay, I don't need to worry about McCree. I'm gonna help my team on point, which is good. That's a good thought to have. But then Lucio comes back. Like, you saw him there. He comes back and he's on your, I believe, Ana, who's back there, or you have a teammate back there, and he gets a boop on you. So if you had turned around and saw him there, maybe you could have positioned yourself, moved yourself to a place where you wouldn't have been able to get booped so easily. I don't know. So there's that to consider. Next point. So now here, Um, you always want to be asking yourself whenever you play Overwatch, when it comes to positioning, anyways. Am I in a position to do my job? Whether that is make space for the team, deal damage, which is your job. One of your jobs, anyways, is DPS. Scout, maybe, or heal your team. Am I in a position to do my job well? If yes, then good, stay in that position. If no, where can I go that I would be able to do my job well and move there? And then you want to ask yourself, but wait, am I in a spot where I can get punished by the enemy team easily? Or if yes, then who can punish me, and are they there to punish me right now? And if they're not, then you can stay there. If they are, then you should leave. Move to somewhere else where you can't get punished as easily. And then you also have to be thinking to yourself, if they aren't there and you stay there, if they come back, where can I hide, or where can I move to so that I cut off sight lines between me and them so that they can't deal damage to me? So this position here, you can do your job very well. You can see basically the entire enemy team, more or less, and even if they're hiding behind the small walls here on the sides, you can use a dynamite over and to still damage them and force them out. So you can. This is a great spot for dealing damage, but you're kind of out in the open, right? You're standing on top of this giant pillar with no cover around you, and because of that, well, first of all, who can punish you here? Pretty much it's only McCree and Hanzo, and you can't see Hanzo right now, but you can see McCree, and he even starts shooting at you, right? Alright, anyway, so then you drop down to the right of the pillar, but so you have the right idea of, I'm getting shot at, this position is bad, I should move. But the problem is where you move. You drop down to the right, the McCree can still see you. So dropping down to the right doesn't really change much from just staying up there. If anything, it makes you easier to hit, because falling targets have a very predictable pattern, especially since you don't have your coach gun because you just used it. So had you fallen to the left instead, you would have been able to cut off your sightlines from the McCree and maybe been able to pick him off because you would be dealing more damage to him, and Ash is better at that range than McCree is because of his fall left damage. But so that's definitely something to think about whenever you're playing. Just, am I in a good position? Where can I go if I am not in a good position? Or if this is a bad position but no one can punish me right now, where can I go to cut off sightlines from the enemy when they do inevitably come back or try to pressure me? Now here, I'm not sure if you're AFK, alt tabbed, maybe looking at Discord, but if you weren't doing any of those things, well, first of all, probably shouldn't be doing those things in a comp game anyways. Like, while you're staring at this wall, or checking Discord or whatever, you can hear their Lucio's down here. There's Zarya's, like, just from sound alone. You can hear Hanzo's here, Lucio's somewhere around here, Zarya's here, just from sound cues alone. Alright, Hanzo's shooting, Lucio's probably there shooting with him. Hanzo jumps back. So, instead of staring at this beautiful wall, if you had just peeked over, thrown a dynamite down, shot that dynamite, blew it up, and then you probably could have gotten a pick on the Hanzo or the Lucio, or both even. Because really the only person who can help them is the Zarya. Unless their Moira is there and it's not moving, which is possible because you can't see anything. That's why you should be peeking over so you can see who you can kill, or even if you can't kill them, you can at least deal damage to them to force them back earlier. They do eventually get forced back by your team who comes. But so your team's now engaging on the enemy team, and your Junkrat ends up dying because of that. While you're staring here looking at the wall. I assume you're alt-tabbed, so let's just say you're alt-tabbed. In which case, okay, whatever, right? But if you weren't alt-tabbed, you definitely want to be peeking over and trying to get a pick or two, especially since they're so overextended. And they can't really do anything. They have no high ground contest except for Lucio and Hanzo. So, but then if Hanzo or Lucio come up, you can just Coach Gun away or dynamite them and kill them. So it's like you do get a good dynamite off, but now they're already backed up. They're already to the position where they can easily break your sightlines. McCree went that way. Now you can't see him. Zarya went up, so did the rest of the team. You can't see him. The only person you can see now is Ryan, but he has a shield that you can put up. Had you done it earlier when they were here, the only way they could have broken your sightline is either going inside, or inside that way, or inside this way. If they want, in which case, by the time your team gets here, your team would have it'd be a lot easier for your team to deal with them if they're here rather than like kiting your team, because then they can just get on into a full-on 1v1 and you would probably win, especially since you have a Mei who can wall them off and freeze them and stuff. Or if they decide to go back this way, you have free reign to shoot on them, and they can't really do anything about you. They can shoot back, but it's going to be hard for them to shoot because Ash's hitbox is already small enough and you're on high ground. So if you weren't alt-tabbed, you definitely want to be like trying to get a pick. Now that's just unlucky. You get domed. It happens. You switch to McCree here, which is an okay pick, I think. Especially after the buff, McCree is really good. That's just unfortunate. Remora probably faded around too far back and couldn't get around to healing you until it was already too late. But it looks like your team's going to win anyway, so that's good. So here, instead of going with your team and getting on point, it'd probably take about the same amount of time to get into position going this way with your team as it would going this way onto high ground. And high ground is very important. Like, it's so good in a game like this because so like especially as a character like McCree who has very little mobility in general, much less vertical mobility, which he has none of. If you want to go from high ground to low ground, for example, just looking at this area, if you want to come from here, let's say this is A to B, all you have to do is just jump down. But if you want to go from B to A, you have to walk all the way around, right? So even if being in A is the wrong place to be, like you don't want to be in A anymore, it's very easy to change by simply dropping down to B. Like you come up here, maybe it's like, oh, this is not where I should be right now. I should be at B. Just drop down. But if you had gone to B instead first, and you're like, oh no, B is not the right place to be, I should be at A, then you have to make this long trip all the way up to A. Whereas if you start out A, if A is the right place to be, then that's great. If it's not, it doesn't really matter. You can just drop down really quickly, and now you're at B. So that's why high ground is almost always, just from a positional standpoint, it's better. Like from a, yeah, it's kind of hard to explain, I guess, but it's definitely better that way. And then the other way high ground is better is if you were on high ground, let's say this is high ground, right? And you have an enemy here, you have sight lines down. You can see basically all of the enemy, whereas the enemy can only see like maybe like top of your head or something, or like the top of your body, right? If this is a high ground, maybe you'll see the top half of you, depending on the angle. And then if they start shooting back, if you're shooting at them and they want to hide, it's very hard for them to hide, unless there's like something to hide behind, right next to them. Whereas if they're shooting at you and you want to hide and you're at a high ground, all you have to do is just press S and back up. And then you're behind cover, essentially, because they can't see above this without like jumping or backing way up. So those are all reasons why high ground is good. Although there's the argument to be made that because of his flashbang, McCree can get more value when he's playing closer to his team. But if that's the case, you can always just drop down from high ground to low ground super easily and use your flashbang that way. So definitely always start out high ground. Starting out high ground is rarely the wrong decision to make. So that was a good fight. They used grab, the enemy team used grab, and they used beat. Whereas the only ults you used, I think, are Nano and Mora, which both charge pretty quickly. So compared to Zarya and beat anyway. So that was good. You saw that your Ashe got killed on the left side, and you went and dealt with the McCree. And you zoned them back with High Noon too. That's also good. And you somehow get a kill too. That's pretty good. So that was a good fight. And that was a good fight because you first punished the McCree on the left side for overextending without his team. And then you punish the Reinhardt who charges into you by, or I guess you don't really punish him, but you zone him back enough with your High Noon that you zone him back enough, you force him to hold his shield long enough for your Junkrat to spam down and break his shield, I think. Or to get his shield low enough so that your first shot breaks his shield, and then you shoot the Zarya behind him with your High Noon. And then you end up just cleaning up afterwards. So your positioning was good because you dealt with the McCree. You were in a position to deal with the McCree. You noticed the McCree was there. That was also good. Here now, your Ashe gets caught out again by the same McCree, right side, and you notice and you shift your focus there, so that's good. If you can... So here, a lot of stuff is going on right now, but you can, if you pay close attention, you can just barely make out Hanzo's footsteps to your left here. And you never once do you ever look to the left. If you just looked to the left, you would have been able to see the Hanzo that was there, because you High Noon and then he kills you. Let's play that again so you can, like, if you focus your hearing to about like this area, you can hear his footsteps. So before you High Noon, you always want to make sure that you're in a position where you're safe. If you're trying to go for an offensive High Noon, or if you're trying to zone people there, you still want to make sure that no one can like kill you easily, I guess. And there, if you had just looked left once, like just a quick glance, you would have been able to see that the Hanzo was there, and you would have been able to flash kill him or whatever. And then you can High Noon. You end up winning anyways, so that's good. But your chances of winning would be significantly higher if you notice the Hanzo there, I guess. So those were two good bubbles. You got to 80 charge immediately. You go with your team here to kill the Frozen Rein. That's also good. But your Ana and Mora get caught out by the Hanzo. So you have no healing right now. But you still end up winning the fight, which is good. You saw the Junk was getting hurt, so you bumped him. That was good. So you're at about 60, 70 charge right now. There's really no reason to use your bubble now off cooldown. which you don't, which is good. Not right now anyway, because the damage difference between like 60 or 70 to 100 or 90, there is a damage increase, but it is significant, but it's more important that you can use your bubble to save someone's life than it is that you deal just slightly more damage. So once you get to around 60 or 70 charge, you should start thinking, okay, I'm high charged already. There's no reason I don't need to be using bubbles to gain charge anymore. I should be using bubbles to get value by saving someone's life or preventing them from taking damage for a little bit to allow them to do something or something like that. So now if you gain charge along the way, that's just a bonus. And that's a good bubble if you can protect someone and gain charge. But you don't want to be bubbling with the premise of I'm going to try to get charge from this. It should be I'm going to protect him and I might get charge also. So that bubble was good on the Rhine. He starts getting pressured by their Rhine. You bubble him after their Rhine already gets bubbled. So your Rhine is free to swing, basically. And now the fight's already won, so I'm not going to harp on you too much for your bubble usage there. Because there's really no way for you to get punished for it, I guess. Unless the Hanzo or unless the Zarya decides to barrage, which he's gonna do right here. So, you lose your mate here to the Pharah. As soon as you lose one person in a fight, you should start thinking about backing up. But they also don't have their Hanzo, so you're actually even right now. So you can keep fighting this, which you do. You're staying around joke. But then you lose your junk. So now you're down one. So as soon as you're down one, you should not be taking this aggressive positioning at choke, especially since they can just fly over the choke, which is what they did. You should start backing up to point so that you can hope to stall on point for more percent time. Because in the end, you're not looking for kills, you're just looking for percent time. You're capturing a point, right? You're holding the point rather. And so you're probably not going to win this fight anymore. You're down one. And you do have some ults coming up, so maybe you can win, but it's better to play it safe by backing up to point and playing on point, because then you really only have to worry about two positions, the left side of point and the right side of point. And you can, hide in a corner behind Ryan's shield for at least, a couple seconds, and that gives you more percentage, which is what you want in the end. Instead, your Junkrat dies, and you do start backing up, but then your Ryan backs up to the right, and you get caught out on the left. And so you always want to be with Zarya. You almost never want to be alone. And I guess you weren't alone because your Ana was back here, but you want to be by your Ryan most of the times. More times than not. There are some times where you don't want to be, but most of the time you want to be by your Ryan, or at least by someone else. Especially when you're starting to back up and disengage from a fight, or starting to kite the enemy team back, because then what you can do is, if you're getting poked by Pharah, for example, you can use a bubble, your personal bubble, to tank damage, 200 damage, and then you can use your projected bubble on your friend that's right next to you, and you would be able to tank damage from that also. So then you'd be able to use two bubbles to help you and your friend to back up, instead of only being able to use one bubble to help yourself back up. So try to stick with your Ryan more often, especially in situations like that where you're starting to back up because you lost people in a fight. So you're even right now. You don't have your 2 DPS, but they're missing a healer and one of their DPS. Yeah. It's kind of unfortunate. Your Ryan is just like, press W, and you do, and then Farah comes behind you and destroys all of you. That's fine. There's not much you could have done there, besides maybe pressuring Farah a little bit so that she doesn't, decides to back up or something. So this is your second time going main. Their entire team is back now, so it's gonna be. So Junk is here. I guess I'll play it a bit. But Junk is there, spamming down on your back line. So it's already going to be very hard for your Ana and your Moira to be able to heal you and the Ryan and the rest of your team, while also trying to stay away, like dodge, matrix dodge the Junk nades and try to kill him, or at least like poke him away. So that bubble was bad. Mainly because their Ryan is already starting to back up, and the Pharah isn't shooting. The Pharah stops shooting as soon as she sees it. So, because Junk's there, Hanzo's somewhere here, I believe. So the only people who can damage your Ryan right now is the Pharah, and well, they're the enemy Ryan too, but he backs up. So really, it's just Farah. And Farah decides to stop shooting as soon as she sees your bubble. And then she goes back to shooting again once it's done. So had you had your bubble here, when your Ryan got slept, you would have been able to protect. You would have been able to get more charge, and you would have been able to save him at most of his health bar. At least half of it. So that was a good bubble. But the Ryan backs up because he sees that you bubbled the Ryan. So that was well played on the Ryan's part. That's not really a mistake on your part. That's a good graph. You got both their supports. And you end up killing both of the supports too. But... So... You see a dragon coming towards you, so you instinctively move away, and that's fine. But you move away into the Farah barrage, so it's like out of the pan and into the pot, or whatever. Out of the pan and into the pot and into the pan. Whatever. So it's basically you're stuck between a dragon and a barrage, and you don't end up seeing the barrage. But even if you had, I don't think you could have killed her. You weren't very high charged. She's only has half health, but you were very high charged, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. So you can see even the barrage coming from the top left, but you didn't see her until it was too late. That's so Hanzo's left, bottom left here. That's Hanzo. Pharmacy's up here. Ryan's in there. Their Ana's somewhere there as well, I think, next to Hanzo. And the Junk is back here. Like, Junk hasn't moved. So he's still in your backline-ish. So, after this, you do end up going main again, I believe. You actually switched to McCree, but so yeah. But you guys still end up going no. So now you guys finally make the decision to go top right, which is the right decision, but it was made a little late. And you get tired. There's nothing you can run about that. So this fight here, instead of going main in this fight, had you gone top right, you might have had a better chance of winning. Now the reason for that is they have 3 DPS: Pharah, Hanzo, Junk. Junk. And the way you play 3 DPS is basically you get a bunch of different. The way you play most like triple DPS, quad DPS, is you get a bunch of different angles, sight lines on the enemy teams, and you play a little spread, so that it's very hard for the enemy team to focus down one area and be able to get your entire team. And the other team is doing this very well right now. They have a Junk here, they had Pharmacy in the skies, Rhino's on point, Hanzo and Ana were over here. So by going main, you open up yourselves to Pharmacy, Junk from behind, the Rhines fighting you face on, the Hanzo's shooting you from the side. So there's a lot of different angles, a lot of sight lines that you have to like protect yourself and worry about. Whereas had you gone top left, so imagine this is the door from top left. Yes, you're funneled into a very tiny choke, but you have 2 bubbles. You have a Rhine shield that can hopefully help you push through. Ideally, you'd have a Lucio to help you speed to point and avoid a bunch of spam damage, which if you had a Lucio, then going main would have been probably the better choice, because then you could just speed onto main and then speed onto point, minimalizing the amount of poke you take from different angles, and you would force them to fight you on point, where you would only have to worry about the right door and the left door, right? But because you don't have a Lucio, going main is basically suicide. Coming top right is also not. I mean, it's still hard to do without a Lucio, but it's easier to do because then you're looking at the Junk here, you're looking at the Rhine on point, you're looking at Hanzo, Ana, and you're looking at Pharmacy. But you're all looking in the same general direction, whereas if you're here, you have to look this way, that way, Rhine, Pharmacy. You have to like split your attention. You have to look behind eventually once you push out far enough, because then the Junk will be behind you. So just recognizing this and realizing that whenever like they have multiple DPS, they're taking a lot of different angles. You're like, hey, let's go top right. Tell your team, and if they don't listen, then there's really not much you can do. Then it's not your fault. Just GG, go next. But yeah, so in conclusion, I believe that's you lose here. Yeah. So to recap everything, instead of facing the Orisa shield straight on, when you don't have as much shield break as they do, you can either switch your comp, go dive, go Rein Zarya, something else, so that you don't have to be worrying about breaking their shield, or go different DPS that can break the shield faster, or just simply play around the shield. Just flank around, throw dynamite behind them, pull their attention to you enough so that your team can go in and like pincer them almost. But if you get in danger, you can just coach down away, you know. So play around Orisa shield. Don't ignore Lucios who are on you. Bob usage. Just be more conscious of when and more specifically why you use a Bob. Always ask yourself, what can I accomplish with this Bob? Can I accomplish that same thing without using the Bob? And in this case, yes, you could have forced them all back just by staying in your spawn and just shooting at them, without having to use Bob on that. You do end up getting 1 kill on the McCree with the Bob, so it's not completely wasted. But you would have gotten so much more value out of it if you had thrown it onto point the next fight, because then it would be constantly zoning them away from point, or they'd have to invest a lot of resources onto it. So Bob usage, don't ignore Lucio's. With Ashe, you don't always have to be taking off angles, but it's not a bad idea to be taking off angles. It'll definitely make your job a lot easier. Here, obviously, be aware of your positioning. Yes, you can deal a lot of damage to the enemy team, but you're going to be caught out. And when you are caught out, think of when you do take risky positions like this, where it's high risk but also high reward. Also be thinking of if or when they inevitably do contest me, how can I get away, or how can I break sight lines? In this case, you can drop back to the left instead of dropping back to the right, where the McCree can still see you. So positioning, positioning again here. Yeah, here, instead of going, main, maybe go high ground. And then always be aware of your surroundings again. Like here, not here, where you get killed by the Hanzo. You could hear him, but there's a lot of stuff going on. You kind of just like tunnel visioning onto point. If you had just looked left once before high noon, you would have seen the Hanzo, and then maybe he would have still killed you, but you would have had a better chance of killing him, obviously, because you know he's there, and then you can high noon from safety, basically. Zarya bubble usage. So you can get bubbles. Bubbles can be used to get charge. They can be used to save people. There's a third way of using them, whereas you can use it to block line of sight, but that's more niche. For example, Sinatra uses it to block enemy transes sometimes in Overwatch League, but that's require a lot of coordination for that, and that's nothing you have to worry yourself with. I don't even do that, and so getting charge, saving lives. When you're under 60 charge, you can be using bubbles. Basically, you can, although you can still use them to save lives, but just to get charge. But then once you're above 60 charge, you want to be not using them off cooldown, saving them to save lives, basically. Only to save lives. And if you get charge from that, great. If not, that's fine. You're still high charged. You can still deal a lot of damage. Positioning. So here, you end up taking a position like a crossfire-ish position from your Ryan. Like he's over here, you're backing up here to the left around this corner. Your Junkrat and your Mei are dead, so definitely you should start backing out. Recognize when you lost a team fight or are about to lose a team fight, and either disengage completely, go all the way back to your spawn or somewhere close, or in this case, since you already have point, you can stall on point to try to stall for more percentage. But while you're disengaging, whether that's the point or back to your spawn, you want to be next to your teammates as much as possible as Zarya, especially on Zarya. It might not be as important on other heroes, but especially on Zarya, you definitely want to be. So then you can use 2 bubbles to help yourself escape instead of just 1. And lastly, I guess, besides being more aware of your surroundings, because you could have, if you had looked up here, you would have seen the pharmacy flying above, going for a barrage, or like the Hanzo on first point or second shrine. If you had looked left once before you high nooned. Also here, with this barrage over here, if you had paid attention, not this one, this one. If you had paid attention to where the barrage was coming from, maybe you could have seen it and maybe killed her, but that's just nitpicking. So being more aware, and then recognizing what team comps they have and how they are playing and how you can play around them. So it's similar to how the Orisa Hog, they on first point, they had more shield break than you. So maybe don't play directly into the shield, play around it by flanking. Here, they're all playing super spread because that's how you play triple DPS. and recognize that and say, hey, maybe we should go top right instead of going main. Just things like that. It's like recognizing how they can win and trying to find out a way to make it so that you play around that so that you can win. So changing up your play styles and stuff like that. Recognizing what your win conditions are, what their win conditions are, I guess is a good way to put it, and how can you play around so that their win conditions. So how can you play around their win conditions so that they can't really do their win condition, and at the same time how you can be pursuing your own win condition. Right? So in this situation, their win condition is basically spread out, poke you from different angles until they get a pick, and then clean up from that pick. They keep playing super spread and poking you from different angles. Your win condition is fight on point, basically. With Ryan Zarya, you want to get close and like brawl them. You want to stick in one big cluster, basically, with maybe the Ashe occasionally going on a flank or junk, but definitely you definitely want to be fighting on point, and then you can use a shatter, get 1 or 2, and then you can clean up from there, or use a grav, get 1 or 2, you can clean up from there. In this case, you kill both their supports, but then the Pharah gets a massive barrage, and your supports are one of them gets caught out by the Rhine, who's like fighting over there because I don't know if their Rhine actually hit their shatter. I think your Rhine blocks it. Yeah, your Rhine blocks it. You get zoned off by the dragon, so you can't really go back to help. So it's more well played on the enemy's part than mistakes on your part, I guess. But so yeah, recognizing how the enemy is playing and how your team can play around that, I guess it would be the last point. So hopefully this was useful. Hopefully this helped. Still trying to get better, so I'd love some feedback. If it didn't help, or what I could have done better, maybe what I did well. But thanks for watching.